Okay, let's talk about Clairo. First and foremost, I want to get this out of the way because every time Clairo is brought up, I think someone in the comments says this, like Clairo's an industry plant, like can't listen to the songs anymore after finding out that she might have gotten some help from her dad. She gets a lot of shit from people for that, and whether it's true or not kind of doesn't matter. You can put an infinite amount of money and press behind a recording of a fart. Does that mean that people are gonna listen to the fart and enjoy it? That people are gonna resonate with the fart? That people are gonna pay to see the fart? No. Making good music is hard, and Clairo just made some good music, so I don't ever really entertain that discussion. It's not really a fruitful discussion. It doesn't really mean anything. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive in. Clairo, if you don't know already, Claire Cottrell, 22-year-old singer, songwriter, born in Georgia, raised in Massachusetts, kind of defined how bedroom pop sounded for the last, 4 or 5 years now. If you haven't heard Pretty Girl or Flaming Hot Cheetos, I suggest you go do your YouTube homework real quick and then come back. In 2019, Clairo released her debut LP called Immunity, which I was a fan of. I liked it because it kind of took the sentiment behind tracks like Flaming Hot Cheetos and Pretty Girl and kind of sat them down to have a talk. And that talk was to say, hey, people really like this stuff and they want more of it and they're watching now, so let's, grow up and flesh out and really bang. And with the help of Rostam from Vampire Weekend on the producing end, the record does in fact bang. Rostam brought his classic thwacky driving drums to almost all the tracks on Immunity, and it really adds a ton of car replayability, at least for me. What I liked about Immunity is that lyrically it was pretty generally relatable, with sound palette choices kind of filling out the rest of the space for the stuff that Clairo didn't dive too deep into detail on. And for that reason, I thought it was a really solid, widely appealing bedroom pop record for all musical walks of life. If you've ever remotely had a crush on someone, you can definitely get into this record. But when I sat down to listen to Sling, I made sure to do another close listen of Immunity before I did, and I kind of found a handful of lyrical moments that kind of needed a little digging and a little more context, but there was like some more depth than, presented on the surface there. Like take for instance on Bags, you have just the simple line like, no, you'd make fun of me. You look at that and you're like, okay, makes a lot of sense. If I were telling someone I knew pretty well that I liked them, like there's a good chance they'd be like, haha, no, shut up, you're stupid, like don't say that, you don't like me like that. Everyone's heard a story like that or been through it, right? But for Claire, this could be a whole new level because around this time she was still, figuring out her sexuality and what she wanted, so telling your best friend who thinks that you're straight, assumably, that maybe you have a crush on them, that's kind of like a way bigger deal and way more intimidating, and you don't really get that on the surface just by reading the lyrics like that. You kind of have to know Clairo a bit outside the music to kind of connect those dots. But my point is that Clairo wrote it in a way that was pretty generally relatable and anyone could latch onto it. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. A lot of music does that all the time. But I'm just saying this is a consistent lyrical approach taken across pretty much the entirety of Immunity. Sophia, on a surface level, again, just a song about having a crush on someone. In reality, if you know what's going on with Clairo said it's actually about one of her first girl crushes she ever had, Sofia Coppola. And when she realized she had a crush on Sofia Coppola, she got so happy she started dancing around the room, and that's what the song's about. You would have never known. It's subtle, but you would have never known. On Sinking, which is the track I come back to a lot, I like it a lot. I know it's probably a hot take. There's probably objectively better tracks on the record than that. But on Sinking, there's that line, outside it's getting colder, why does it feel like I'm older than I asked to be? I just found this out for this video, but apparently Clairo has rheumatoid arthritis. And so when it gets cold, that stuff usually flares up and it gets pretty painful. And you feel a little old because typically older people have this condition. And not to mention rheumatoid arthritis is a big deal and it's kind of painful. But again, that's nothing you would expect to hear on a bedroom pop record full of love songs, right? Same deal on I Wouldn't Ask You. The whole song is about her boyfriend taking care of her when her rheumatoid arthritis got pretty bad, and that dynamic kind of resulting in greater intimacy, even though it probably sucked for both of them the entire time. But suddenly now knowing that the line, laying in your bed, call it intimacy, hits way harder and means a lot more than if you didn't know anything about Clairo. There are probably a ton more examples of this on Immunity that I'm not even aware of. And at this point you might be like, Serge, why is this a big deal? Like artists do this all the time. They write lyrics that mean one thing on the surface and then mean more to them. Like that's not new. But the big deal is on Sling, Clairo's done doing that. entirely. What's funny to me is that Clairo talks about how when she worked with Rostam on Immunity, Rostam really pushed for her to be comfortable with her vocals being further up in the mix. And while they're definitely more upfront sonically than, obviously stuff like Flaming Hot Cheetos and Pretty Girl, they're not more lyrically upfront. In fact, I'd be as corny as to say the writing philosophy difference between Immunity and Sling can be very well represented by each of their album covers. On Immunity, you see Clairo, but she's kind of out of frame and she's not even looking at the camera and she looks like she wants to get out of frame. It's kind of like she's saying, okay, here are some songs, I'm gonna leave them here, but don't look too far into them. And on Sling, Clairo is fully in frame. She's not looking at the camera, but she's looking at her dog Joni, who kind of inspired the whole album. And it's all right out for you to see, head on, and she's perfectly comfortable, it seems. And that's what I'm kind of getting at here, right? Lyrically on Sling, there's no more ambiguity, there's no more like deeper look required. Like, it's all very much on the table in the lyric, and it's very raw and it's very personal. Out of the gate on Bambi, the first track, Clairo kind of talks about stepping into a world designed against her, which is the music industry. It's like the first line. She talks about being told things from management like, hey, you're big now, the moment's here, take it or leave it. And her reply to this all is basically, what if all I want is conversation or time? I move so I don't have to think twice. I was immediately taken aback because A, we have lyrics that, just on the surface, are clearly about Clairo's personal life. There's nothing else to find out. It's there. B, the instrumentation, totally different from the lo-fi banging drum stuff we got on Immunity from Rostam. Now we have this gorgeous, lush, closely mic'd, very colorful instrumentation from Mr. Jack Antonoff, the one and only, who seems to be very busy these days. And C, we have a key change in the song. I don't know if there are any key changes on Immunity. I don't think there are. These are all things that you would never find on Immunity, and kind of lets you know from here on out that we're leaving that Clairo behind, and we're exploring this new, matured, wizened Clairo. Not that she was immature before, but you know what I mean. And side note for people who really love digging into like influences and inspirations and stuff, a lot of these songs sound totally different from Immunity because Clairo's playing into her inspiration from Elliott Smith, Joni Mitchell, The Carpenters, Fleetwood Mac, like that kind of music. And along with that, Clairo has said that on this album, the main difference in approach is that she started writing a lot of these songs for Sling on piano as opposed to guitar, which completely changed like what she did structurally and just how the songs ended up coming out in general. The next track, Amoeba, hits you with the lines, aren't you glad that you reside in a hell and in disguise? Nobody yet everything, a pool to shed your memory. Could you say you even tried? You haven't called your family twice. I can hope tonight goes differently, but I show up to the party just to leave. But like, do you get what I mean about no ambiguity anymore? Like, Claire's giving you self-critiques of her own mental health in a lyric, and it's not potentially about something else or somebody else, it's definitely about her. And it's not something that needs further context or research to understand. Feeling like you're in your own head enough to call it a personal hell and then kind of critiquing yourself for maybe not doing enough to get it back on track and fix it, that's as personal and honest as it gets. And while I love the new lyrical approach to the writing on this record, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on the thematic focus on domesticity here. If you listen to this whole record front to back, you kind of get the sense that Clairo is tired of being used and abused. Not necessarily used and abused by anyone specifically, although in some cases that does seem to be what's going on in the lyrics, but in general used and abused by the games of life and love, and how they both present way too many variables and emotions that linger for far too long sometimes. Partners that don't hold up their end of things, an industry where she's not respected nearly as much as she should be for her ability, and a society that expects so much of her. All these topics are pretty daunting, but Claire spending a lot of time with her mom and dog kind of gave her enough time to maybe start to find the answers. And a huge part of the answer for her seems to be settling down. Taking care of her dog Joni has taught her that constant, simple happiness is what she's after. And for someone who kind of blew up overnight and was thrown into touring and recording studios and told to just keep going, to keep making money, I can see this being an earlier realization for Claire than most, even at 22.
I don't think I was in a happy place for a long time surrounding music. Most of my career up until this point has been mentally pretty bleak. I've been trying to kind of adapt and contort myself in ways where I can cope with what's going on. I do think that I finally am at a point where I'm catching up to myself.
And I think the themes and lyrics on this record really speak to catching up. in that context. Zinnias is a song that's written about a type of flower that grows where Clairo's from in Georgia, and she kind of explains how living a life where she's close to her sister and her mom and maybe raising a baby and a dog, those are all things that seem really appealing to her right now. Blouse kind of very bluntly deals with being a female in the music industry and how being listened to and silently objectified are very unfortunately mutually exclusive at times. When I heard "If touch could make them feel, touch me now," kind of broke my heart a little bit. Wade kind of touches on something Clairo's talked about in interviews for quite a bit on the press run for this album, which is like you kind of get to a point where you have to go and make good things happen for yourself. You can't take a backseat to your own life and wait for good things to happen to you, which makes a lot of sense. She wants to settle down, so she went out and purchased a house and decided to fix it up and take all that responsibility on for herself, and she's doing it for herself. How many times can I say herself? Harbor is really interesting to me because while I like it a lot, I feel like it, in a weird way, it could be a song that would have been on Immunity just thematically. It could be kind of like a, hey, this isn't working. I really like you a lot, and I know you don't like me back in the same way. Like, you know, what can we do about that? I could see that being on Immunity. But on Sling, it kind of says, hey, I'm fed up with this. You know I'll let you win whatever game you're playing here because I like you so much and you know I'll stick around. But just shoot me straight and tell me that you don't love me because I'm at the best place I've ever been with myself right now and I can take it. Which like could be perceived as jaded, but to me kind of just says that Clairo's experienced and can recognize when things are one-sided and can recognize her own tendencies when intimacy is involved. I think it's just a very experienced thing to say. On Just for Today, Clairo explores the idea of having a kid and then having that kid have the same mental issues as her because a lot of mental illness is hereditary, and then having to explain to that child why they are the way they are. What an intimate yet selfless conversation to think about having at 22. Little Changes talks about manipulation in a relationship and how that can kind of lead to you actually having a jaded perspective on many other things in life, kind of like the second verse speaks on here. And to close it out, management kind of just talks about how Clairo needs to step away from it all for a little bit, taking some time for herself so she can hopefully get to that lifestyle that's free of all the things that were wearing her down previously. And you know, on that note, to me, now it makes so much more sense why she was unhappy with Immunity. Like she said that before, that she was musically unhappy during the Immunity era. And I don't think she thinks it's because Immunity is a bad record or it was poorly done or anything like that. I just think Immunity talks about a lot of the aspects of love that, you know, whether it's obvious to the listener or not, that she kind of wants to leave behind. She's kind of sick of what she's talking about on Immunity because it's really wearing her down. And it was kind of written and produced and dolled up in a way that was very commercially viable. And again, nothing wrong with that. People do that every day. And it was smart because that record did really well. But did it really represent Clairo's like full and honest feelings on everything she was going through? Not necessarily. She wasn't lying or anything. It was just not the full story and she wasn't comfortable telling it yet. But I will say she's been super mature about that musical unhappiness because whenever she talks about it, she's like, look, I don't regret anything I did because everything I did is the reason that I'm here where I am now. And with that, I'm really, really happy that Claire put out Sling. Meme on Jack for the production all you want if you're a Jack Antonoff hater. I'm not. I like it. But Sling is a very beautiful record where you see someone pretty rapidly mature and gain the confidence to tell many people what's been on her mind. That being said, it's clear that Clairo did this for herself and that it's kind of her swan song record. She said in an Apple Music interview that maybe she wants to take 5 years off and teach and kind of find herself a little more. Maybe we'll get another Clairo record in the next few years, but my gut instinct is telling me she's just gonna tour this one and then kind of dip for a little. Which, after everything she said on Sling, is very understandable. I texted my friend this and I thought it was kind of funny, so I'll read you it to kind of close out the video here. And I think if we never hear from her for a long time, that's fine and definitely deserved. If she does decide to come back with something, it'll be even better than Sling. You just like fast forward to that scene where she's teaching high school or college English and class gets dismissed and she's all content, but you know, like a little melancholy and 29, and she swipes herself into the piano room and some kid who didn't leave yet peers in and sees her and he's like, wait, you're fucking Clairo. And she's like, yeah, kid, I was. And then I'll talk about it and boom, inspiration for the next record, it happens. It's just a meme. I hope Clairo finds peace. It's totally a joke. Let me know what you thought of below. I know I really only focused on like Clairo growing up as a human being from Immunity to Sling and, you know, the thematic indications and the lyrics and everything like that. But if you want to talk about like production, which was, I think, gorgeous, and I barely said anything about or anything else about this record. Drop a comment below and let me know what you want me to take a look at next. I know there's new Isaiah Rashad, there's new Bleachers, there's new Clairo, there's new Billy, there's gonna be new Lord. I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, let me know in the comments below. Oh, and new Silk Sonic. Don't sleep on the new Silk Sonic. Okay. See you in the next one.